Namaste and welcome to this exciting episode of Sathology Debunking Mythology. Sat means truth and Logos means a study or science. Sathology means science of truth. Opposite of that is mythology, which means science of fake lie imagination, study of fake lie imagination. Sathology builds your identity, mythology destroys your identity. That's why the Western academics, colonizers used this term to describe the history of most of the natives. And that's why they went there to civilize them. Understand? Civilize them. If today I was about to tell you, I'm going to civilize you, I hope most of you will throw me out. So I have a very, very special guest. He's a very prolific author. He's a very well regarded social media personality in India and mainstream media also. And also, he has authored more than 4 books. So without delay, let us welcome Dr. Ratan Chawla.
Namaste.
Your latest book, Conflict Resolution, is such an apt time because the whole world is trying to resolve conflicts. And today's phase, 2021, was a year where we suffered from pandemic plus everything else. Everything was full on. So, what is the reason why you wrote this book in this way?
Thanks, Aditya, for having me on the show. I can admit it was my request so people know more about this book because this book is basically directed towards academics, towards people who want to really study and research. And just to correct you, I have done 9 books, and this is the 7th book only on RSS. And this is based on the PhD which I did from Hindu University of America, Florida. And it was rewritten for this particular format. Coming to the topic, unfortunately, RSS, Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh National Volunteer Corps, as it can be translated in Hindi, in English, has always been looked through the paradigm of Hindutva or Hindu Rashtra, Hindu nation, in terms of Hindu-Muslim animosity, etc., which is not really looking at the whole picture. So this book, I have written book on RSS, on Hindutva, on Hindu nation, on its various dimensions of work, which impinge upon entire all the dimensions of national and social life. But this book is a little different. This book goes beyond what RSS has been known for. It talks about how a gigantic organization can actually not just keep on opposing governments, but actually, while criticizing the governments or the people who rule, also can contribute to the issues that affect the society and try to minimize the conflict and minimize the violence, and also try to resolve the conflicts in a way that suits the Indian genius, and also the way where people are not divided or removed from the scene, but taken along in a very unified way with a long-term vision. So that was what I wanted to come out with. But that was not a priori conclusion. Actually, my guide Yashant Pathak, who is shown as the co-author, the book is at the back. He is my guide. He suggested that I study RSS resolutions. What happens till the media opened up and till RSS started speaking to media? RSS was only passing resolutions twice a year on various national issues, which nobody read, even though it was given to media didn't read. But RSS not only passed resolutions, but it acted upon it the way it thought in the best interest of the country. So what are the resolutions? I started reading them, and then they started in 1952 when this constitution of RSS was put into practice with elected body and various other rules of doing organizational work. And I found that they had touched upon nearly every aspect of national life. What struck me that the highest number of resolutions passed by RSS were on very serious conflict prone areas like Jammu Kashmir, Punjab, and Northeast. So I decided that my research will be on these 3 areas because these are 3 serious conflicts which nearly tore asunder the integrity of the nation, and which were exploited by enemies of Bharat, or enemies within and outside. And how did it react to those issues? Whether its vision its resolutions were visionary, long term, not worrying about what it gains or loses in the short term. Also, this is just one part. I also did a lot of references how the media was reporting those issues, how they were close to what resolution passed, how they had different ideas on how to resolve the conflicts, and how government was reacting, how political leaders were reacting. So it's a complete picture of contemporary Indian history, right from 1947, when the first in Mizoram, in Nagaland, the first resolution was passed by those insurgents that we are not part of India, and in Jammu Kashmir, where there was attack by Pakistan immediately after the independence. This being the two issues which immediately resulted in very serious threat, and that is where RSS started taking interest. It also took not partial view but integral view of the whole thing. It had a couple of issues which I have criticized in the book also, but overall, we find that in the long term, how RSS involved its own people at the risk of their life and limb, and also stood up against the current wisdom of the polity and the intellectual discourse, and which ultimately prevailed. This is a very interesting study. And in all the regions, RSS used different strategies. RSS used different ideas, somewhere because the situation was different, somewhere because its own organizational strength was limited. So that is the background of this research.
Fabulous, because the general the Western academics, they create narratives all over the world, and that's why people from all over the world, from conflict zones, they try to come to the American universities to create a narrative. Like we had many narratives which were started here, Black Lives Movement and many other movement, Black Lives Matter. In fact, all lives matter, including Black lives. I'm a big proponent of that movement, or support that movement, because historically speaking, what happened to natives in America is an untold story, just like what happened to natives of Kashmir. And so, one thing I see as a very positive contribution.
I would also like to add, Aditya ji, that even in Northeast, it was actually violence against the soul of those tribal people of Northeast, which was sought to be destroyed by the church. And it began in 1836. They rode on the shoulders of British imperialism, and we ended up with those difficult times in Northeast. And that is where you can find the church, which looks very calm and very peaceful in other areas where they dominate, how they act against the local people. That is also very well documented in the book.
No, church has never been peaceful. I mean, you look at Philippines history. Philippines, they were given a choice: either you convert or be killed. In 100 years, they converted the entire Philippines, which was a Hindu country, purely Hindu country, into a Christian country. And church has never been peaceful. You look at the history of South America, including North America. The 21 missions in California, Catholic missions, the amount of violence they have done towards the natives is untold. I mean, if there is a 21 mission files made by any other Indian filmmaker, it will be a very sorry story. Now, coming to this Northeast you touched upon, and I see that the non-political organizations like the RSS that you have written here, and they are mostly human service-based organizations. What is the role that they have taken parallel to the government in protecting the human rights of the natives or tribal people, like who are natives, as well as people who are natives of the land, who may be living in cities, but their faith is native to India? What have they done?
That's very critical question you asked me. See, RSS work in Northeast started somewhere in 1946. Then RSS was banned on the pretext of Gandhiji's assassination, which was, of course, a hocus pocus story. And when it reorganized itself again after the ban was lifted unconditionally, Eknath Ranade, who later founded Vivekanand Kendra, the famous Vivekanand Rock Memorial in Kanyakumari, southern tip of India, he was the general secretary, and he went to Northeast. He traveled there for nearly a month, and he came back. He was alarmed. So he went to his native state, there's Maharashtra, and met the local Sandhichalak, the president of RSS there. And he said, we must start the work immediately in Northeast, or in next 30 years, it will be totally lost. Considering his appeal, he talked to the camp which was happening at that time. Immediately, many youth decided to go to work in Northeast, and also, so 8 pracharaks or 8 full-time workers who get no money, no remuneration, they went to Northeast. 2 from North went to Northeast, and they started work there. There was no support, there were no funds, there was continuous threat from the church. and the terrorists who were supported by the church, but they began work. They realized that it is not easy to work directly with the way they were working in other parts of Bharat because of the continuous threat and also threat to people who join. So they evolved the idea that they will start educating people because the biggest bribe, as you can say, or the pressure it can be that church builds wonderful schools, brings people to school, and then slowly converts them and creates a kind of hate for the local culture, for the local people, including name, as you have seen in the US also. So, having seen that, they started some schools there. So, there is Vivekanand Kendra, there is Ramakrishna Mission, there is RSS, there was its affiliate Seva Bharati, and slowly the school network built. Secondly, they also decided to do social service or social relief for the people who are very poor, who were remote, and unfortunately, the government of India, the ruling class, generally did not treat Northeast very kindly because it was very distant for them. There are not enough Lok Sabha seats, there are parliament seats, and they were remembered only during elections. And the government tried to pacify the militants, the terrorists in that area. So there was no support from the government. In such an underdeveloped area as a situation, RSS began work in a very tough time. So I'll give one example, which is a touching. There is a gentleman called Bhayaji Kane, whose name was actually Shankar Kane. He went to a place called Ukhrul, which is about 6 kilometers in Manipur, near the Myanmar border. To reach there, you need 3 days of walking. So he started a school there. He realized that kids will not really get exposure to Bharat, and they will have the sense of alienation because nobody cares for them, and they were looked upon in a very bad way. So he said, I'll take the kids to Mumbai, to other parts of Maharashtra, let them intermingle with the local people and feel the sense of oneness. When he decided this, the locals opposed. Some local church elements started saying he will remove kidneys, he will kidnap kids and all. So what to do? So he had a young student of his with him called Jayavant. He's still around. He said, okay, keep this boy with you. I will take your kids with me. When I come back with the kids, you can release the boy. So that is my guarantee. And surprisingly, the young boy also agreed. So this is how the work started. And that boy, Jayavant, now he's a very senior person. He's still working for Northeast schools. That is the level of work done. RSS volunteers were killed. They were kidnapped. They were treated very badly, continuously threatened, but they kept on working. This network of Seva and also the network of schools slowly revived the local people's help, but they were not converting people. They had hostels in which Christians studied, Christian boys studied. There was no effort to convert, but basically to connect them to the homeland. Then a lot of other people started the same activity with influence by RSS. So slowly this movement started, and there was also an important element that RSS did not try to identify with the typical mainstream vegetarian and mainstream Hinduism or Hindu Dharma, etc. They let them follow their own religion. In fact, told them that you nurture an indigenous faith. We will help you nurture the indigenous faith, because when they convert, they uproot their roots from the native culture. They tell them not to talk to relatives. They ask them to break idols, throw away or burn away their scriptures. So they try to cut off them from the society. This indigenous culture helped them get the strength so they could survive that difficult time. And also now slowly over years, this indigenous culture movement is slowly picking up pace as people realize that losing the roots is not really worth the kind of support that church gives them. That emotional connect is lost, the sense of history is lost, the sense of tradition is lost. So they now slowly are converting, very slowly, but they are asserting, they're Christians, they are asserting themselves that they belong to this land and they are the local tribes, they are close to Bharat, they are close to Hindu Dharma. So these changes have happened over 70 years. So you can imagine how much work went there, and RSS gives so much of importance that every top leader of RSS has spent some years in Northeast. Not only that, every pracharak of RSS in Maharashtra, because that has adopted Northeast, has gone to Northeast to serve 10 years, 20 years, 5 years in that area and work there. So this is in short how Northeast have slowly turned around with these various aspects of supporting them in strengthening their own roots.
We know the history of colonization, which is purely faith-based colonization all over the world.
Since you talk of colonization, you talk of civilization. I'll give one more example. The church that tried to also remove the local scripts. So there have been continuous struggles to keep their own script, which is the native script. Church wanted to come to Roman script, and there are wonderful sayings which are quoted from African philosophers how even script can be a weapon for uprooting the people's culture. And that was tried here. In fact, a gentleman who tried to fight against it was actually killed. And there are many people, despite all this threat, who nurtured their own scripts and tried not to be blown away by the Roman script which they were trying to impose.
Yeah, the Roman script is part of the colonization thing because it was a papal uh, papal bull which was done that their languages must be written in a script which Europeans can understand, and that was as part of it. In fact, all the local languages, whether it's a Islamic rule or whether it's a Christian rule, most of the local dialects were cut down. Like in the case of Islamic rule, it was Farsi was introduced in India. In the case of Christian rule, the Roman English was introduced, and we are speaking English today. Your book is
Yes.
also in English. That's their success partly. But the second part is the mindset training, uh, showing the local cultures, local customs, local traditions as inferior to Europeans.
Yes.
Now, most of the Europeans, they are trying to do yoga, meditation, which the church has obviously considered satanic now. Satan is a work of the Satan, and the pagan. Pagan was a word introduced, which was to demean the local cultures. And many political, ultimately, what happens is the academic narrative goes into the political mainstream, and the politicians, they say that it's the scientists and the academics talking about that, and they start cross referencing. So it becomes a
Mhm.
cabal that the judge, the jury, the witness, the victim, everything becomes one. So the clear definition of aggressor versus defender is the law always looks at aggressor versus defender. Now that is completely lost in the narrative. So how does you in your book you must have analyzed it. In my book, Gold, Glory, and God also analyzed it. But how do you think that this concept of aggressor versus defender, or clarifying the confusion which is purposefully created so that people lose trust in their local cultures, how do you think that you have captured it in this book?
See, that's what I stressed, that in case of Northeast, RSS went on stressing that they are also part of Bharat. They also stress that their culture is much better than what culture is being imposed upon them, and to help them feel proud about their own culture, about their traditions, about their own knowledge systems. And that is what has happened in new education policy finally, where the Modi government has decided that even tribal knowledge will be shared by the students and they'll be strengthened. So this sense of inferiority, this sense of having something poor, that was the real fight when this faith in their own indigenous culture was raised by RSS with their own knowledge systems. Conferences were done, seminars were done, various what we call yatra pilgrimages were done, and even the native culture of Bharat, which comes from Mahabharat, for example, where many Mahabharat characters come from Northeast, and that was also highlighted. Recently, government had an exchange of people from Arunachal Pradesh who believe that Rukmini belongs to that tribe, the Idumishmi tribe, and they were taken to Gujarat, where Krishna ruled, Bhagwan Krishna ruled. So this intermingling and this strengthening of their own ancient roots in Bharatiya culture was also highlighted. And there everywhere it was a strength. If you go to Punjab, effort in Punjab was to showcase that Hindu Sikhs belong to the same family. Sikhism is more influenced by Vedanta, by Vedic thoughts. They have thousands of names of Bhagwan, Krishna, Ram, Hari, Govind in their Guru Granth Sahib than any other. And how, though it's a different religion, the roots are same. And as far as families go, you will know in Punjab, including my own family, there are Sikhs, there are non-Sikhs in every family. And it was a custom that the first son would be dedicated to gurus, and he would become a Sikh from every caste, every creed. That was the scenario. So this was highlighted when efforts were made by the Khalistanis to highlight the history created by British called Macauliffe, who played mischief and showed that how Sikhs are totally different. So this was fought against. This narrative has been slowly built up. Even now it is built up. So that was falsified at the cost of losing many people when the Khalistanis come and fire firearms on the RSS shakas where people are collected together, because I was in a place called Moga in Punjab where 25 people got killed. I met one of the person, Jay Krishanji, whom I dedicated the book, who continuously fought against this divisive mentality. And his slogan was that we will not allow another partition or like 1947 in India. So the stress of the local, the unifying factor, anywhere from Kashmiri Hindus to Punjab to Northeast or anywhere in India, that there is an underpinning, very strong underpinning of cultural nationhood, which India has, which nobody has been able to destroy. There are fault lines because of diversities. But diversities have a very unifying factor below that layer that is being exploited by the people who want to break Bharat. But RSS stresses on that unifying factor, which is Bharati culture, which is Hindu culture. Whether you are from whether you're converted as Muslims or Christian, if you look at our roots, they belong to this very tolerant, very in fact respectful or republic of faith, where democratic right of every religion, every belief system is maintained. This sense of pride was inculcated. If you look at the insurgencies, India has the longest insurgency record anywhere. The other longest record is Sri Lanka, where the insurgency started in 1983 and ended in 2009. Anywhere else, if it crosses certain time, it ends up by win of the insurgents. But in India, as you have seen right from 47, in case of Khalistan agitation in 1980s, India has been able to win over, has been able to maintain integrity of the nation and bring people back, or have been negotiating with people without giving away the basic sense of unity, whether it's Northeast, whether it's Jammu Kashmir. And that is what RSS stressed continuously. And that is what it was able to have it say. So, nullification of Article 370, removal of 35A, giving rights to refugees who came from Pakistan and were living a life of non-citizen, numbers about a million. Then the untouchable Dalits who were brought to Punjab but never given citizenship, the Gorkhas, rights of women who were given second-class citizen status. There is a long story, I'll get into that. So this injustice to various kind of minorities, what was due to 370 Article 35, that was fought continuously, 70 years of continuous struggle. Finally, these articles were removed. So that sustained campaign in then the trust that what we believe is right for India, that is how RSS worked in those areas. And if you look at overall, 36% of any insurgency of more than 10 years has gone in favor of insurgents. This is US government record. 28% can end in a stalemate by giving some concessions to insurgents, and 36% only have gone into government victory. So India has a wonderful record because this recognition of its strong cultural unity has been the strength of Bharat. Where we have tried to gloss over it, we have problems.
The US has a Department of Natives and Native Welfare. They do have a department, federal department. But
see, there is a difference, Adiji, that when you say native and Americans, there is clear-cut difference. Natives are natives, and colonizers have come from outside. In case of India, very vicious narrative was created that Indians also came from outside. So they created a division of Dravid versus Aryan. They created a division between the migrants. Like Hindus came from outside, Aryans came from outside, whites also came from outside, Mughals also came from outside. So it was kind of, roadside in, anybody come and walk out. That is not the truth. Now, all these genetic studies which show that Dravid, so-called Dravidians, and the North Indians or the Aryans and the Northeastern, they have same genetic pool. That is not genetically proven, which includes a study by Harvard and a very large sample size. So we have a very different sense of indigenous people compared to what Christian imposition is on you, that those people are left imposition, which says that XYZ is indigenous. So in India, they try to create a sense of indigenous in case of tribals, while tribals have been living with the town people, urban people since the time of Ramayana, as you have seen in Ramayana narrative. So that sense of native exploitation is very different from the way colonizer did in America. That is the solution they try to apply in India to break down the population into various categories, use the fault lines, whether it was any Indologists, whether it was British or Portuguese, that is what has happened. Talk of colonizations, if you see what they did, millions died in famines because British wanted just the grains and they had huge taxation. Portuguese had inquisitions where thousands of Goans lost life. So if you look at that murderous, strain of church, which you have seen in USA, where they worked in conjunction with the invaders the whites who came, the colonizers. In a different way, the same model was applied right from Northeast to Kerala to North also.
No, in the case of USA, the even though they have the tribal native welfare, never the schemes are ever applied. Till date, natives are protesting against their own rights. Some of them even do not get a chance to vote because their addresses are post boxes, and according to registry of voters, they are not allowed to use post boxes. They have to have physical address. But if the mailbox is 25 miles away, and that's where the USPS will go, that means they will never get a voter registration. So if anyone complains, in US till date the justice is not there. In fact, the places of worship of Native Americans are regularly desecrated. I hope that we apply the same principles of RSS in the US also, where the natives can be protected, because these natives have no culture, no faith left, and half of them are converted to Christianity, and so
Yeah,
they are.
Aditya ji, I will also add that in India, even if we consider the scheduled caste, scheduled tribes or the tribals as a special category, as soon as India became independent, they got special protection, they got special reservations, so they can preserve, they can nurture their own people because they had been sidelined, they have been exploited by the whites and by the colonizers and also by the church. So this law was brought in as soon as the constitution came in. So there is a difference. In your case, the women's voting rights or the rights of the natives were exploited, were not allowed. They were oppressed for years together before the revolution took place, civil war took place. In our case, we didn't need that because that is the sense of Hindu accommodation.
Very true, because this has been the case in the US, and most of the times the integration has not happened yet, and that's why you have black churches are separate. Within the church, there is a huge division, and and just like the religious differences, many people think that US is a democracy, but it's a religious democracy. So some people have more rights over the others, and that's what many of the Muslim groups are fighting also. Now, coming to again in the case of India, the colonized narratives which were done, like the Aryans, like you said, so well you put it, that even the Indians are not from here. That's what they said. So what did they go to conquer then? What did they go to loot? So this kind of foolish narrative was spread in other parts of India before 1948, before 1947, which was Burma was part of India before 1947. Sri Lanka was part of India before 1947, official records, and even the Afghanistan was separated in 1919, which even today the Afghanis are opposing it. Now, do you think that this idea of protecting the
Even if
rights of
you
the
remember Northwest Province, the Pakhtuns, they voted for Congress before partition, but they were also hived off from India, and they said we have been abandoned. We have been left orphaned by the Congress. Shah Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan was a very sad person, and he was jailed. He suffered a lot, but they wanted to be part of India.
they very euphemistically called him Frontier Gandhi,
Yes.
but actually, his voice was never heard, because I do not know what was the reason. Now, coming to a very important question, the natives of Burma, which are Buddhist and Hindus generally, even today, Myanmar, and the natives of many natives of Bangladesh, many natives of Pakistan, and many natives of Afghanistan. Afghanistan has been wiped clean of all the natives now. Nobody's
Yes.
left there. So native by definition is who is mindset and culture not converted. That is the definition of native. So the when you talk about these original people, how does your book help them in realizing that they need to have something like this to resolve the civilizational conflicts right now?
Yeah, see, there I talk about the Chakma Buddhists. Not many people know that after partition, when the partition was decided, there was an area which was, Chakma Hills, which was actually majority Buddhist, and they believed they will be part of India, and they raised tricolor Indian flag on their houses, on their offices. But then it was declared to be a East Pakistan area, and they were oppressed, they were violated against. Then they were thrown out of their places, and they trekked to India. So the leader went to meet Nehru. He was made to wait for 3 days, given 5 minutes, and told that we can't risk, a war with Pakistan because of you. So you can go back, and they were asked to go back. That person died a broken man, and he was interviewed by Vinay Sahasrabudhe, now vice president of BJP. So there was this Chakma Buddhists for whom RSS stood up. The Rihangs and Blues who refused to convert, they were thrown out their state where they were staying. They went to other states. They were given support in their struggle. Similarly, it happened in Assam also, the Machas and Karbis. So they were never fighting with each other, but because of this church influence, because of their identity crisis, they fought and they were thrown out their own homelands. And that is where RSS stood up with them, gave them relief, gave them place to stay peacefully. And everywhere they were able to connect to those people, and they were able to find solutions for them. So similarly, it also found out that how the tribals in Bastar and in Chhattisgarh, those belts in central India were also exploited in the name of revolution. Or in case of Kerala also, where communists are very active in Andhra. So everywhere in the tribal area, RSS started its work to support the local tribals in their belief system and see that they could stand up against this anarchy and this oppression by outsiders in the name of religion or in the name of providing them comfortable lives.
So one aspect comes in that the economic equality, and this government in India has done a lot of work in giving
Yes.
economic opportunities, which was not given in any of the earlier governments. And most of the earlier governments were highly leftist and anti-India to a large extent. So when we talk about the economic empowerment, what do you capture in your book that how the conflicts were resolved with economic empowerment?
Well, RSS honestly did not work in the economic empowerment in such a way. It has another allied organization which works for the rural development, which works for the local handicapped people, which works for people to use their own skills to economically survive. It didn't have strength enough to get into the kind of work that church does in distributing money, but it strengthened their health system, it strengthened their education system, it strengthened their local skill sets, whether it was Northeast or Central India. So to see to it that they could become self-dependent, independent of the influence of other outsiders. And now what government has done that due to this policies are never implemented. Now what has happened with the new digital economy, they are able to pass on the benefits directly to the beneficiaries in poor areas, in tribal areas, using the direct cash transfer method of money transfer, etc., using government policies. So that has helped people get over this problem of not being taken care of. In Northeast, the amount of infrastructure done is humongous, unbelievable. Where you used to take 7-8 days to reach a part of Arunachal or 12 days to reach part of Arunachal, today you can reach in just about 4 5 hours. You have flights everywhere. You have people now going for tourism. So sense of integration. These policies were espoused by RSS all through, providing what kind of economic policies can implement it. It was passing resolution on those lines, telling government to do these kind of things for the people who live there, provide infrastructure, provide power, provide education, provide various kind of schemes where they can use their talents to do what they can do in terms of small scale industry, handicrafts, vegetable produce, etc., which you used to go waste. Northeast is one of the highest producers of fruits and vegetables. They used to go waste because there are no processing plants. So these ideas were continuously disseminated, passed on to the governments of various parties, but somehow the parties never bothered, except first Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji, who introduced a special ministry for Northeast, which was defunct, though we had a prime minister for 10 years, who claimed to be a state parliament member from Assam, Mr. Manmohan Singh. After Modi's husband, you find that care for this last man in the queue, last person in the queue, whether it was part of Central India or Northeast, anywhere, that he gets the benefit in terms of housing, in terms of toilets, in terms of cash transfer, subsidies, or insurance, crop insurance, etc., which never reached them. So the ground level work was done by RSS. But since it was the government policies that required to be implemented, they were implemented now after coming of Modi ji.
So one of the last questions which remains is in this show is that the concept of empowering the youth and women, because that is a most primary concern of most of the human rights organizations, and they have a habit of producing reports on other countries except the Western countries. I've not seen any amnesty report criticizing the US government or coming out in the media on mainstream CNN or Fox News or any other news channel where they've criticized the removal or purposeful neglect of the human rights of the natives in the Western countries, particularly Franco-Germanic tribes in Europe, Romanis in Europe, including Turkey, and also natives of USA, which also include the earliest migrants to USA, which were not European origin, particularly Chinese Americans, and also Indian Americans who came during the freedom struggle of India. So Udham Singh was right near my house, El Centro, and it is not never captured by the American media that what happened to him and why the American intelligence handed him over to the British intelligence, where we knew that he'll be prosecuted. So, what is your view on this?
I have spoken of it earlier. I will speak again because this is very relevant now. There is an organization called ICCS, International Center for Cultural Studies, which is inspired by RSS members, and it started its activity of bringing together pre-Islamic, pre-Christian cultures, and it was called the International Conference for Elders of Ancient Cultures and Traditions. And we had scholars from 34 countries, the point of countries you have mentioned, right from Latin America to Canada to Africa, Europe, UK, everywhere, and Southeast Asia, etc., who have still survived in somewhere little better, somewhere in very microscopic minority. They were brought together to strengthen that base. And this first conference was attended by RSS chief Sudarshan ji way back in 2003. They were so fascinated by the support of Hindus to their cause, and which was inspiration of RSS. They said we will come every 3 years because the conference was supposed to have to be held in different parts of the world. But they said no, we feel inspired by RSS, we feel inspired by Hindus, and we believe that Hindu is a big ship which will under which we can sail safely. We don't believe in another religion which will eat us up. So this belief in the Hindus, because of their very republican nature and very respectful nature for every other culture, was the reason why they felt so protected, well, they felt so secure, and they decided that we'll go with these people. So this strength of Hindu dharma, this is what is required world over, that when you provide the right kind of protection, or I would say even I would say respect for their existence and recognize their existence, their knowledge, their ancient cultures and their ancient traditions, they will thrive, they will survive. Slowly there's a reawakening of Zoroastrianism in Iran, for example, Druids in UK. So this very close bond with the nature is the strength of ancient cultures and religions. And respect for each other is another aspect. They never converted, they never fought with each other in the name of religion. So this strength of all these cultures is what that ICC has brought together. And it is not very big movement, but it's big enough for those small cultures, those left out cultures, to feel that yes, they can still survive, they can thrive with the help of Hindus. So this strength of Hindus of nurturing every culture is the strength of Bharat, and how which Modi is projecting today. I think that is where RSS inspired people play a very good role, and Sudarshan ji understood the importance. He was present all the 3 days, and that is where the future could be for all these small cultures and these traditions, which otherwise will be crushed by the Abrahamic faiths.
In fact, Buddhism has the followers have decreased consistently because of the insertion of the Abrahamic values in Buddhism. Or rather than initially it was a Buddhist values which created the New Testament, but now the Abrahamic
It
values.
is ironic that Buddhism is non-violent, and wherever it was non-violent, it was simply run over by the Abrahamic forces, somewhere by Christianity, somewhere by Islamism. But where it has become militant or strong in terms of defending the faith, whereas Myanmar or Sri Lanka, you find they are not going to give an inch to any other person who wants to exploit them or convert them. So nature of Buddhism in a way has changed in these countries, and I think if every the most tolerant, most respectful religions or spiritual traditions of world, if they're to survive, probably they will have to become much more stronger and much more aggressive to save themselves. In one of my books, RSS 360, I've quoted Conrad Elst that the religions or cultures who are not Semitized and who didn't have the knowledge and the depth of Hindu Dharma were simply run over in case of Africa. So probably Hindu Dharma requires some kind of Semitization or some kind of system where they will not be gobbled up by these aggressive religions.
Thank you so much, Ratanji, and thank you all the viewers for watching it live. Do consider this book, Conflict Resolution the RSS Way, from Garuda Publications. So the
Thank you
link
so
will
much.
be, the link will be in the description, so you can get the book for yourself and read it yourself. By the way, Ratanji, you and I matched the number of books we have written, 9.
But I've also edited and translated 16 books. So I will score over you for some time till you again start becoming, start writing more prolific.
No, you are always above me in any way. So
No, not at all. You are young, you have energy, and I think you're going to the way you are writing books, I think you are going to complete 50 books in next 5 years.
thank you so much. And for viewers, do comment on the video. That is the most important thing for us. And so that we know what you feel about the video. Namaste. Thank you.
Thank you. Namaskar.